Hey guys, this is Kevin Kim with Precision Powerlifting Systems. I'm going to do a video today on creating a personal philosophy. So I love reading books from some of the more successful coaches in other sports that have, come out over the years. So like John Wooden's books, Nick Saban's books, Pete Carroll's books, Bill Walsh's book. So there's been a bunch of them that I've read, and they all come down to one key factor that all of them say you need to begin with, and that's creating a personal philosophy. So it's actually been in the last maybe year or so basically since like COVID stuff happened, that I started getting more into the coaching philosophies of some of these greats and stuff, and like really trying to understand what they were doing to build the successful foundations that they built over the years. So in John Wooden's book, he was talking about how it took him 16 years to develop his philosophy. But once he developed his philosophy, he ended up winning 10 straight national championships. And I still believe that 10 national championships is the most all-time in Division I men's basketball. Pete Carroll in his book was talking about developing his personal philosophy after he got fired from the New England Patriots. So he had this period of time where he was able to kind of reflect, think about past experiences, and think about the future opportunities he would have to deliver his philosophy to a group of football players and to build up a successful program. So he ended up going to USC, being very successful there. I think he won 2 national championships in 6 out of 9 years, competed in the BCS Bowl games. And then he went to Seattle. Obviously, they won a Super Bowl, and then, of course, lost to the New England Patriots the year after. So he had a successful run in both college and in the NFL from learning from past experiences. Bill Walsh took a very poor San Francisco 49ers team and turned him into a dynasty in the 90s. So when you look at the success of all of these coaches, and they all say the same thing, that you need to have a personal philosophy. You need to know who you are as an individual to control your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions in the right direction towards, whatever you plan your vision to be, for however you define success in your sport. So, when I was thinking about it, one of the things for developing your own philosophy, and this is kind of where I was lacking previously, was you're a different person from year to year if you don't have a personal philosophy that's guiding those thoughts, emotions, and actions. So when I first started in powerlifting, the MMA stuff for me was going away. Like, my friends were moving away, so I wasn't doing that in the mornings anymore, and I wanted to compete. I've competed and participated in sports since the time I was 3-4 years old. At 37 years old now, I've been actively involved in sports for over 30 years. So it's a major piece of who I am as an individual. So when the MMA stuff was just kind of like falling by the wayside, I decided I would compete in powerlifting. And I was at a gym when I talked to the owner. I'm like, hey, where do you see the future of the gym going? And I had just got promoted to director of strength and conditioning. And he said he wanted it to be a gym for strength athletes. So I was like, man, I better learn something about powerlifting. So I signed up for a meet. I'm 190 pounds body weight. I squatted 315, bench 275, and pulled 460. I had a blast. But because there was this vision of where the gym was going to basically just be a haven for competitive strength athletes, I had set my sights on just becoming a better coach, a better strength coach, understanding the strength sports more, how to program for the strength sports, how to build a successful strength sport culture. So after that first meet, I'd reached out to Shaco a little bit before the meet, and he helped me with the competition block for it, so like my peak and my taper and stuff. And then afterwards, I worked with him for the next 3 years. So I was guided at a very high level. I was fortunate enough that I had one of the greatest coaches of all time in this sport help set me on the right path to learning and understanding and coaching the sport itself. And he was always willing to answer my questions and stuff too, which was really, really helpful. So the 2 seminars that I had with him in person, the personal coaching session that I had with him, the 3 years that I spent being coached by him and sending videos, getting feedback, and just back and forth via email and stuff was extremely helpful in the beginning. But then, the issue, I guess, comes up where it's like, oh, this stuff doesn't work. You need to do these things. Like, there's so much information out there on the internet and stuff that I started to get really confused. And then it's like, well, I should try singles. Well, I should try this, but acute chronic work ratios, and I need to keep everything in these lines. I was really constraining myself to a lot of limitations, and I didn't know who I was as a coach. I think I've always been a confident athlete or just human being in general. Like, I've been good at almost everything I've ever tried. I got great grades without really trying hard. Um, Grad school was hard because it was a lot of work, but I breezed through and I had a really high GPA at the end of it. Um, Most sports I ever took part in, I was better than most. So I was not necessarily the best at everything, but I was able to hold my own in anything. So there was always this like built-in confidence. But for the first time, I'm participating in a sport where I'm not very good. I'm 190 pounds body weight and I'm only squatting 300 pounds. There are girls that are squatting more than me that I'm seeing, like even at the gym and stuff. So I think subconsciously, what this sport really did is it rattled my confidence a little bit, because it's like I've never been in this position where I need to handle not being very good while demanding respect from lifters and all of these things. So I'd worked with Shaco, so there was an intern at the gym at the time, Danielle, who was the first person that I had coached, that I made do the programs and stuff with me. So I was writing her programs, coaching her and stuff, and she was doing very well. And a couple of friends I did it for. And I did that over the course of 2 years before I started taking on competitive lifters. When I started taking on the competitive lifters is when I started having the issues, I guess, with my confidence. And even at the time, it wasn't an idea for me that I was going to be this full-time powerlifting coach at any point. It was just, I'm probably going to coach a few people, but I'm still going to be doing the adult fitness stuff, and I had some high school athletes and stuff like that. So as my group started to grow, the pressure on me in finding my worth as a coach was very difficult, because I didn't have the numbers to back it up. The internet was basically telling me how much I suck at my job, which they still do today, but I don't care as much what they have to say anymore. But it rattled my confidence quite a bit. And I didn't have a personal philosophy at the time because I never felt like I needed one. I always worked hard. I was always disciplined. I did the things I needed to do, because sports just creates that culture. And that's a culture I've been part of for 30 plus years at this point. So everything that came to me was just second nature. That's just what you did. But I guess as this started to develop and coaching a competitive sport now started to become my full-time job, I lost direction a bit. Like, I was training and I was just constantly getting frustrated in training. And I've struck out on baseball and like threw my fucking bat because I was pissed. I've had a bad soccer game where, I've thrown my equipment at the end because I was pissed. But never in my life have I gone into a training situation every day like that and just got more and more frustrated. And the frustration was winning. And for the first time, I felt like this is maybe not a sport I want to continue to participate in for the long haul. I fucking hate it. I wasn't enjoying training. My numbers were going backwards. I had an overall shitty attitude. And it required a lot of self-reflection at this point in time for me to be like, well, why are you doing this then? When I sat down and thought about it, I realized that like my goal of lifting is not to be an elite athlete anymore. So like that's always been my focus, is always having that athlete mindset, right? Where I need to get better, I need to compete against everybody, and it just became overwhelming because I've never been that far behind everybody else before. So when it became that overwhelming for me, it broke me. So when I started to reflect, I'm like, man, at the end of the day, I coach a lot of people who are a lot stronger than me. And my goal of lifting is just to be a better coach, to lead from the front, because I feel it's important that I don't need to be lifting a lot of weight to earn their respect. All I need to do is I need to lead by example. I train harder than everybody else. I do the things that I'm supposed to do, and I lead from the front. I think that's really important. So I'm reading all these books of other coaches and stuff because I had that, well, this is who I am. I'm no longer an elite athlete participating in a different sport. I am a coach trying to get athletes to realize how elite they are. So I started reading all these coaching books. And they're all saying that you need to have your own philosophy, and it's going to be something that you really feel inside of you. When you say those words, you feel what it means, and it represents who you are as a person. And I started to really reflect on not only just my experiences as a powerlifting coach and athlete, and how I learned from every failure and what they really meant, and like in hindsight being able to really understand some of the situations that I had put myself in as an athlete and a coach. But I started to reflect more on just like life in general. Like, what is my personal philosophy? What defines me as a human being? Like, what actually is going to direct my actions, my thoughts, my emotions um, as a human, which includes being a coach. So, one of the things now I've written articles about my childhood. So, we lived with me and my brother. We lived with my father, who was a bipolar alcoholic, and he was very abusive. So growing up in an environment, there was a period of time where like we didn't even have beds. We slept on folded blankets on the. We shared a room, me and my brothers, folded blankets on the floor, and not having a lot. Sports was always like a major outlet for me for sure, and like this is where I think my like love of like the camaraderie of a team, the hard work, the discipline, but it also being in this type of situation where you're being verbally and physically abused, you're just living in mental illness basically. Our apartment, there were just holes in the walls, doors off of hinges. Like it was not a great environment to be in. But I remember laying in bed all the time and just being like, if I work hard, I know I can get out of here. Like I'll get good grades, which gives me the opportunity of an academic scholarship to go to college. I'll work my ass off in soccer, which will give me the opportunity for an athletic scholarship to go to college. Like just keep working hard. It will get better. We'll get better. We'll get better. I would tell myself all the time. And I think just going through that process of being a kid and just having to tell yourself that this will get better if you just keep doing what you're supposed to do. And like I just always had this hope, like deep down inside of me, this hope that things will get better. And I never let that circumstance that I was in tear me down to the point where I didn't think I could get out of it. Like I just always had this hope and this belief in myself to be able to do those things. And so when I started thinking about those times when that was happening, one of the things that I remember my father saying to me, and he didn't give a lot of good advice over the years, that's for sure. And don't get me wrong, like the environment in which I was in led to a lot of violent outbursts on my part, like getting arrested for getting into all kinds of fights and stuff like that. But what it did do is it taught me how to handle stressful situations and that I'm always in control of my own outcomes. And every time that I've hit this huge hurdle in my life, I've been able to overcome it. And I think it's just because like that positive self-talk when I was younger and just having that belief in myself and that hope for a better future and all of that stuff. So I remember an earlier conversation with my father. Now, he didn't really mean it in the way that I'm going to describe it when he was discussing this, because he was all about us just basically fighting anybody who pissed us off for the most part. And when you're a young kid and you're getting beat up at home by your dad, the last thing you're going to do is take one of your peers' shit. So like if somebody looked at me the wrong way, I'm throwing a punch. And that's obviously behavior that I had to kind of learn over time is just inappropriate. But it also, as bad as it sounds, like there are powerful moments there as a kid when, it's like, hey, I'm more athletic than you, I'm stronger than you, I'm tougher than you. I've been through more shit and I'm willing to put myself through more shit than you are. And that's why I'm going to end up on top. And that's just always been like my personality with the way things work. But for the third time now, getting back to the thing my father had told me. So I remember being a kid. I was young at the time, maybe 9, 10 years old. And he said, you got to draw a line in the sand. And when you draw that line in the sand, it represents your values and who you are as a human being. And what you need to do is you need to defend that line in the sand at all costs. That the second that somebody crosses that line, you don't back down and you don't run away. You stand and you defend that line in the sand. So when he was saying that, he was 100% just referring to me not letting kids pick on me, basically, and to just basically punch him in the mouth. And like for me, like when I heard that as a kid, like at that age, it's like literally, I was like, oh good, I can hit this kid and my dad's not gonna get mad. They might get mad at me at school, but when you feel small and powerless, taking that power back, there's something there in terms of fighting back, right? So like now when I look back at it as an adult, I've always I've always had that line in the sand. So there was a situation. I was 19 or 20 years old. I'm at a cookout with, there were some kids my age. My dad and his friends were there and stuff. And everybody's drinking. I mean, that's what my dad did, right? So he's calling me all kinds of names I'm not going to repeat on this here. But because I had made it a point to always draw that line in the sand and defend that line at all costs, I decided that he had crossed that line that day. And me hitting him in the face in front of all of his friends at 19, 20 years old was a very powerful moment for me. And maybe it's not the best way that I could have gone about doing these things. But in hindsight, I think it was really life-altering for me to actually stand my ground and to fight back under that situation. I defended that line in the sand like he had taught me when I was much younger. So it's something that carried me there. And then as I got older, so after that moment, I mean, there's this, somebody who had so much power over me as a kid. When you fight back and you realize that you're more powerful than that person, there was this intoxicating sense of like self-confidence that was oozing out of me. But also this just, I needed to flex on everybody at the time. So I got into a lot of trouble. Fast forward, so I had an incident happen when I was 20, but I didn't get in trouble for it until I was about 24. So at this time I got federally indicted, put on house arrest. I had just had a child and I got fired from my job. So here I am feeling handcuffed, right? Already nervous about being a parent, affording being a parent. And now I don't have a job. And not only don't I have a job, but I'm trapped in my house. So trying to get a job under these circumstances is going to be very difficult. But again, I was like, I don't have a choice, and I came up with this plan in my mind. I was like, I'd gone to college and I got money to play soccer. My school switched from Division II to Division III. I lost the scholarship. My father wasn't paying the bills, so I wasn't able to register for classes. I was able to roll that money into loans, transfer schools. Same thing had happened. I thought he was paying for classes. It didn't happen. I went to the registrar's office and they told me I couldn't register for classes because I owed like $10,000. So when I was sitting there that day, I was like, man, I'm really stuck right now. But what I can do, so online college started to become more of a popular thing. I was like, well, I have all this time in my house. I was like, how can I make myself better and make myself more employable and use this situation that's really bad to my advantage? So I found a way to be able to pay down those bills, roll them into more loans, and enrolled at an online college to get my undergraduate degree. But I had said, I'm not stopping there. I'm not just going to get an undergraduate degree because everybody now has an undergraduate degree. I want to go to graduate school. So I graduated with honors in my undergrad. I was able to enroll in graduate school where I also graduated with 3.8 GPA from graduate school. So I used that situation to my advantage. When it seemed like the times were really low and that I had no options, I had programmed myself from the time I was a little kid to be able to handle that moment in time and to really be able to push forward. And other stuff has come up over the years where I had to face a lot of adversity, but none of it ever compared to that. And I was just well equipped to always handle it. And then COVID hits and all of that stuff, and you have to be flexible and adaptable and all of those things. And now it's just second nature to me to be able to handle that. So when I was thinking about all these like past situations, like literally, I was like, man, I've gone through a lot and I've had great success when the times were stacked against me. And at all these times, like just thinking about high performance, right? Because when you're involved in sports, like even just watching professional sports, there are certain people you watch and you're just like, how is that person doing that? That's just like next level, right? And there were people I've played with over the years. That same thing, they were just like next level of things. And it's like, wow, how are they like that? And when I started really thinking back on my life, I was like, the high performance wasn't the outcomes that I was getting in soccer or any sport that I participated in. That, I might have done like a flashy move, scored a goal, had a, whatever it was. That wasn't me displaying high performance. Me displaying high performance was every time that I encountered adversity that seemed like an insurmountable challenge, I was able to stay big in the face of big problems. And I was able to keep that line in the sand and defend that line in the sand and face that opposition as bravely as humanly possible. And don't get me wrong, I mean, there were times where I doubted myself, of course. And there were times I was so frustrated I wanted to run through a fucking wall. And there were times like when things came up and it's like, fuck, not this again. It's like I've been working so hard and now you're gonna try to roll me backwards. Right? So all this stuff that I went through as a kid, and then, you get the fucking assholes on the internet that want to bring up this stuff because you can find it on the internet. None of you know what I've been through, and none of you probably would be standing where I am today if you had gone through the same shit that I had gone through. We're not the same person. And you might out-total me, but you absolutely do not display high performance in the same manner in which I have throughout the course of my life. So when they bring it up on the internet, yeah, of course there's some feelings that it's like, the fuck is this coming up again for, when I've worked so hard to put it behind me, right? So like you get this initial feeling where it's like, God, no matter how hard I work, this is always haunting me. It's always coming back. Somebody's always bringing it up. But at the end of the day, it's just a reminder of what I've gone through to be standing here today. And if it wasn't for the 30 years of me playing sports, and 30 plus years, and if it wasn't for the conversation that my father had with me to tell me to draw that line in the sand, and that line represents my values as a person, and to defend it at all costs, I probably wouldn't be standing here today. He had also told me, this is the only other good advice he ever gave me, is because as a kid, I would get really irritated and frustrated. And I was playing a basketball game, I was fucking pissed. I must have been 10, 11 years old, maybe even a little bit younger. I remember kicking a chair and just being like, in my head, I didn't say this out loud, but like, what the fuck? And he came up to me and he goes, you need to take this negative situation and turn it into something positive to work for you. And I was like, all right. So then anytime I got that feeling where like, the pounding in your chest and in your stomach when you start to get pissed off, I'd always tell myself, turn this into something positive. And then like my focus and my ability to actually participate in something, like my performance would go through the roof in these situations, and I became very good under pressure. And not even just under pressure in sports, but under pressure in test taking in school and in life. It taught me how to handle that. So anytime that like I got that feeling, it was just my learned behavior was to stand my ground and to push forward and to defend that line in the sand. Don't retreat. You gotta keep moving forward. So doing all this self-reflection over time, it's like I needed to come up with my personal philosophy. And of course, a personal philosophy is something that can change and adapt over time as you change and adapt over time. But I thought of these 3 words that kind of just really fit in with who I am as a person. And they were stand your ground. So like those 3 words, like when I think about them in my head, they give me this feeling of, you're fucking right, I'm gonna stand my ground, because that's what I've done my whole life. I've drawn that line in the sand. I've defended my values. And don't get me wrong, there were times that my values were completely screwed up, but I've always stood my ground. Even under anytime, I think when a lot of people read this, like your personal philosophy has to mean something to you individually. My personal philosophy doesn't have to mean something to you. It just has to mean something to me. So a lot of times like standing your ground can sound like it's a really stubborn way of being like, oh, well, you can just disagree with everybody on the internet or whatever people want to say. That's not what that means. Standing my ground doesn't mean not learning and not advancing, right? In order to advance forward and to keep progressing and to be able to face the opposition bravely and to win those battles, you need to be flexible and adaptable in your learning styles. You need to learn from everybody. So like I've always had this, I'm gonna take everything I can from each person I talk to, and then I'm gonna use it to get better than they are. And that's always just kind of been how I've been in all sports and school and whatever. I'm just really competitive as a person, and that has always come out in those types of situations. But for me, this is my personal philosophy: stand your ground. So no matter when, no matter what, if the circumstances you're under seem large, you need to stand your ground and you need to defend your values at all points. Don't retreat. Stay big. Don't retreat. Keep moving forward. And like in an objective sport like powerlifting, right? There's going to be times where you do things and it just doesn't go well. And because it's so objective, it's going to let you know it's not going well. And you have options. So if you miss a rep, right, and you get pissed off, and me as a kid wanted to kick that chair that day in a basketball game or whatever it is, like you want to throw your belt, you want to do those things, that's retreating. That's giving into the situation. That's not standing your ground. Standing your ground is facing that situation bravely, being able to face it and come up with a solution to that problem. It's learning that your failures are necessary for you to progress, that you need to learn from that failure in order to defend that line and keep moving forward. Because those weights are always going to want to keep pushing you behind the line. Other people are always going to want to challenge your values and push you back. But you got to stand your ground, you don't retreat, and you stay big in the face of big challenges. You don't let those big challenges and those big adversities make you small. I'm going to go into more detail on like my visions and how my personal philosophy guides that vision. But hopefully I was able to explain my personal philosophy in a way that people will understand it, and they get where I'm coming from. And if not, it doesn't matter. It's what matters to me. And it's what, when I face adversity, these three words give me that feeling where it gives me in the pit of my stomach and in your chest, that tightness in your chest that allows me to take a negative situation and to turn it into something positive. But I'm going to go into more detail about my philosophy, my vision, and just kind of what I've learned from reading the John Woodens, the Nick Sabans, the Bill Walshes, the Pete Carrolls. It's very enlightening, and it's so different, right? Like you want to learn what all these, you get in powerlifting. It's like, oh, what is this strong person doing for a program? As a coach, us learning from the coaches that do it at the highest of levels, and the fact that they all say this probably means something. So in a time where I think everybody's starting to lean more towards AI programs and internet coaching and, data collecting metrics and all that stuff. And don't get me wrong, some data is important to allow a coach to make decisions, but you're dealing with human beings and they need to have they need to find their own passion, their own purpose, and their own personal philosophy to guide their emotions, thoughts, and actions so that they can display their true potential at the end of the day. Every single person has greatness inside of them. Doesn't matter the circumstances of where they begin, where they came from, nothing. Everybody has the potential to be great. And there's no Excel spreadsheet that's going to bring out that greatness. It requires a coach and a mentor, a friend and another human to be able to challenge them in ways to always challenge them, but to challenge the human components of high performance, the confidence, the focus, the attention. There's so many factors that come into that. The focusing on the process and not the external outcomes. Well, when we collect data and we're just looking at Excel spreadsheets to individualize programs and to make these adjustments for us, that's not coaching the human. You're just so focused on coercing performance that you're missing out on the human elements that are actually required to get people to display their greatness. So in a time where I think everybody's leaning more towards computer programs to do their coaching, I'm going in the opposite direction. I'm going to start talking a lot more about having a personal philosophy, having a vision, having values that allow you to focus on the process that over time doesn't just give you 5-pound PRs. It gives you a firm place to stand, to be better at your job, to be a better family person, a better friend, to just live a greater quality of life. When you stand your ground, right? So I'm going to use my personal philosophy. When I stand my ground, when I face adversity, you know what happens every time that you face adversity bravely and you don't retreat? You build grit. And grit might be the single most important variable in dictating high performance outcomes. And it also strongly correlates with overall well-being in life. So if you can face adversity and failure head on and understand it's required to actually learn stuff and build character from it and continue to progress, you literally give yourself the right, you earn the right to do difficult. If you've never faced adversity head on like this, and you always, let's even use powerlifting, I'm gonna quit my coach, I'm gonna go do a different program, I'm gonna blame somebody else. If you don't face adversity head on, you just become a weaker person. There's a reason why average is average, because most people aren't willing to stay big when the obstacle in front of them looms large. Most people are gonna shrink up, be smaller, and run away and blame somebody else for those problems. But that doesn't lead to well-being. It doesn't lead to overall satisfaction. It doesn't lead to high performance in sport or in life. So helping people find their personal philosophy so that they can display their greatness is part of coaching. And it's something that I'm trying to do myself, and I'm going to continue to make mistakes, and I'm going to continue to learn from them. I'm going to continue to stand my ground when I'm faced with adversity. And in doing so, I'm going to keep building more grit. I'm going to keep expanding on my ability to handle adversity. And I'm gonna help show other people the same things. Sports is the best way to be able to learn these things, especially in objective sport, because it's not always going to go your way. In fact, a sport like powerlifting, where progress is incrementally over a longer period of time, it's really gonna challenge these skills, and it's the coach's job to guide that process. And this is a process I'm really gonna talk a lot more about, because I think it's a lot more important than the X's and O's of writing a program, which I'll still talk about because our program follows the rules of deliberate practice, and I think that stuff is really important. But the majority of coaches and lifters out there are missing this part of developing high-level skill, that there's a human component, there's a character component to high skill, and you can never truly achieve your greatness if you don't focus on it. For now, you can follow me on Instagram. It's KWCan, and our team, Precision Powerlifting Systems.